Hi, I'm the granddaughter they tried to erase. While my grandfather lay in the ICU, fighting for his life, my own parents drained every cent I'd saved. $990,000, money meant to save him. My sister smirked. We need it more than he does. My father sneered. He should just die and stop wasting resources. I stood there, unable to breathe, knowing they had no idea what I was about to do next. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? And tell me, if your own family betrayed you like this, what would you do? The ring of my phone sliced through the quiet like a sharp blade. It was nearly 10:30 at night, and I was at my kitchen table, sorting through invoices for a shipment of cardiac monitors. The leaves outside scraped against the driveway in the October wind, and for a moment, I thought about ignoring the call until I saw the hospital's number. Mr. Thompson, it's Dr. Keating. Your grandfather's condition has changed. His heart's in severe distress. We might need to operate sooner than expected, possibly within the week. The rest of her words blurred, but I caught the urgency in her voice. My chest tightened. I promised Edward years ago, after the first heart scare, that I'd always be ready. I hung up, reached for my laptop, and logged into the savings account I'd built for him. $990,000, untouched for almost 2 decades, enough to cover the best care money could buy. The sight of that number always gave me a strange peace, like an anchor. Tonight, it felt like a lifeline. I didn't sleep much. The hospital had him stable for now, but I knew surgery wasn't cheap, and good doctors didn't come cheap either. By morning, I was back at my desk, coffee in hand, logging in again to double-check transfer details. The screen loaded, and my breath caught. Balance, $0. I refreshed the page twice. 3 times. Same result. I called the bank instantly, my voice shaking. The rep on the line was calm, almost rehearsed. The funds were withdrawn yesterday afternoon, sir. Authorized by your co-signers. Co-signers? Yes, Richard and Elaine Thompson. My parents. It felt like the air in the room got thinner. That account was mine, built from years of long hours, dirty warehouse jobs, and side contracts. The co-signer thing, that was from when I was barely 20, working part-time and needing their signature to open the account. I never thought they'd use it. I dialed their number. My mother answered on the second ring, her tone casual, like we were discussing groceries. Oh, that money. We needed it for something more important. More important? I could hear the disbelief in my own voice. Grandpa's in the ICU. That money was for him. Lydia's voice cut in from the background, dripping with satisfaction. We need that money more than he does. He's lived long enough. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. You can't just— Don't be dramatic, my mother interrupted. We're family. We share what we have. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. My eyes fell to the small brass pocket watch on my desk. Edward's. The steady tick filled the room, a quiet reminder of the man who taught me how to stand tall. He'd carried it through decades at the steel mill. I ran my thumb over its worn surface, the way I used to when I was a boy sitting next to him on the porch swing. By early afternoon, I was in my truck, heading toward my parents' house. The drive was familiar. Same cracked sidewalks, same overgrown hedges, but I felt like I was on enemy territory. I stepped inside without knocking. My father was in his recliner, TV blaring a game show. He didn't look up. You know, he said flatly, he should just die and stop wasting resources. It was the way he said it, like he was talking about an old appliance that had broken down. No hint of sorrow, no shame, just cold practicality. I stood there, jaw tight, heart pounding. Every word I wanted to say was balanced on the tip of my tongue, but before I could speak, the sound of heavy footsteps pounded against the porch. Then, bang! The front door slammed open. A man in uniform stepped inside, holding a thick envelope. His eyes swept the room with calculated precision before settling on my father. The color drained from my father's face. He stepped inside, shut the door with a firm click, and the sound seemed to pull every pair of eyes in the room toward him. The TV kept murmuring in the corner, some game show host laughing at a joke no one here found funny. The man in uniform didn't bother introducing himself to me. His gaze never left my father. "Richard Evans?" His tone wasn't loud, but it carried authority the way a courthouse clock carries time. My father shifted in his chair, thumb hovering over the remote. "Who's asking?" "Daniel McCrae, process service." He held up a leather wallet with his credentials, then extended a heavy envelope. "This is for you." Dad didn't take it right away. He looked at my mother as if she could wave it away with a flick of her wrist. She folded her arms and shook her head, a small warning for him to keep his cool. Lydia was already on her feet, curious and smiling like it was gift opening time at a birthday party. "You can leave that with me," she said. "It goes to Richard," Daniel replied, patient but firm. "Acknowledgement of receipt, please." Dad finally stood, the recliner complaining beneath him, and accepted the envelope. His fingers dug into the seam as if he could hurt the paper for daring to arrive in our living room. He didn't open it. He looked at me first, then at my mother again, and only when Lydia said, "Oh, for heaven's sake, just see what it is," did he slide a finger under the flap. The smell hit me before the words did. Coffee, Edward's blend. He used to bring a tin when he stopped by here, swore it tasted better from that old metal can than anything fresh off a shelf. The scent lingered in this house the way a hymn lingers after Sunday service. For a second, it softened the tightness under my ribs. Then Lydia's voice sliced through it. "Is this supposed to scare us?" She leaned so close to my father's shoulder, her hair brushed the page. "What does it even say?" Dad scanned the first lines, color draining a shade. "It's a notice," he muttered. Daniel stepped closer, calm as a courthouse clerk. "Formal notification of a pending financial investigation related to withdrawals tied to a protected savings account. Preliminary only, not a lawsuit at this time. It establishes record." Mom made a sound halfway between a scoff and a sigh. "This is ridiculous. We're family. Families take care of each other." "By emptying the account meant to pay for his surgery?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Lydia's eyes met mine, bright with triumph. "You're overreacting. It's family money. You're not the only one who cares about Grandpa." "If you cared," I said, "you wouldn't have touched a cent of that fund." She shrugged, like this was all a misunderstanding. "He's old. He'd tell us to be practical." She looked to Dad for backup, and he nodded, relieved to have her line to repeat. Daniel didn't flinch. "Just so we're clear, Mr. Evans, the notice documents the withdrawal pattern and parties involved. It also references bank security protocol. If the matter escalates, you'll receive further service." Dad puffed himself up as if he could outstare a court date. "We haven't done anything wrong." Daniel's expression didn't change. He set a small card on the coffee table, then turned to leave. Halfway to the door, he paused beside me, voice lowered just enough for only me to hear. "You might want to talk to the bank again," he said. "Something about the way it was processed. Off the standard path." The words were simple, but the weight behind them wasn't. He gave the slightest nod, then stepped outside, closing the door with the same clean click he'd used coming in. Silence, just for a breath. The TV audience clapped for a stranger's jackpot. Lydia laughed softly, mean in its music. "So, a piece of paper? People send those when they want attention." I reached for the envelope, and Dad pulled it back like a child grabbing his toy. "You made this happen," he said. "You couldn't leave well enough alone." What's well enough about draining a medical fund? I kept my focus on him, not her. "There was a plan. You knew it." Mom stepped closer, palms up in false peace. "You're not the only one who loves him. We have responsibilities too." "Then why take the money reserved for his care?" I asked. "Why not call me? Why not ask?" Lydia scoffed. "Because you always say no unless it benefits you. You think you're the only person who's ever sacrificed?" Please. I felt the heat rise, the old ache that comes from being told your effort doesn't count. I breathed in the fading coffee, let it steady me. I've said yes more times than either of you will admit, I said evenly. And that account existed for one purpose. One person. Dad jabbed a finger toward the door as if he could point me out of the house. You're not going to turn this into a circus. We'll handle it. Handle it? I glanced at the notice still trembling in his hand. You just got told you're on record for a financial investigation. That's not me making a scene. That's due process arriving on your doorstep. Mom went pale, then red. You'd drag your own parents through mud? You poured the mud, I said. I'm just refusing to drown in it. Lydia's voice dropped to that sneer she uses when she wants to sound reasonable on the surface and cruel beneath. What are you going to do exactly? You think some bank manager will take your side over ours? We've been with them longer than you've been alive. That wasn't true, and she knew it, but facts weren't the point. Pressure was. I stood straighter. I'll do what I have to. For him. Dad set the envelope on the coffee table, flattened it with his palm like he could iron out the meaning. You will not embarrass this family. We'll talk to the bank. We'll make sure they understand the arrangement. Do that, I said, because I'm going to talk to them too. Mom tried one last time to frame this as a misunderstanding. You should rest. You get emotional and make messes. Let us fix this. I thought of Edward's hand on my shoulder the day I signed the first deposit slip. Set it aside, he'd said, and when hard days come, you'll be ready. He trusted me with the plan because I followed through. I wasn't about to stop now. I'll call when I have an update, I said, and turned for the door. Don't you dare bring outsiders into this, Dad snapped. You hear me? I faced him. A process server just handed you a notice in your own living room. Outsiders are already in it. Lydia folded her arms, chin high. Go ahead, make your little calls. You'll find out nothing sticks. That's the thing about the truth, I said. It tends to stick all by itself. I stepped onto the porch, where the air held a hint of wood smoke from a neighbor's yard. My fingers traced the edge of the notice through the thin envelope as I slid it into my bag. A record, a timestamp, something solid in a day that had been anything but. Behind me, voices rose, then muffled. I didn't linger to decode them. I needed direction, not more noise. At the curb, I sat in the driver's seat and let the engine idle. Daniel's quiet warning replayed in my head. Off the standard path. That could mean bypassed approvals. It could mean a friendly teller slipping paperwork through. It could mean a back-office override disguised as routine. If it was a clean withdrawal, someone would have nothing to hide. If it wasn't, a paper trail would breathe even if people lied. I adjusted the rearview mirror and caught my own eyes. Tired, yes, but steady. The anger had cooled into something sharper. Resolve. If there was a seam in how they pulled this off, I'd find it and pull until the whole thing unraveled. I put the car in gear, eased away from the house, and let the neighborhood roll past in a blur of maples and mailboxes. The hospital would keep Edward stable for a few more hours. The bank, for once, couldn't wait. Daniel's words echoed in my mind as I drove to the bank, the envelope still clutched in my hand. I parked, took a breath, and walked through the glass doors. The smell of polished wood and faintly stale coffee hit me instantly. Susan Hartley, the branch manager, looked up from her desk when I approached. Her usual polite smile faltered as soon as she saw the statement I laid in front of her. "What exactly are you asking me to look into?" she said, her tone measured. "I want a full breakdown of this withdrawal. $990,000. I kept my voice calm, but every word was edged with steel. She glanced at the numbers, then at me. "That's significant. Withdrawals like this require in-person authorization, usually from the account holder." Her eyes searched my face for a reaction. "I didn't authorize it," I said flatly. Susan hesitated, then leaned back slightly. I'm not supposed to pull security footage without a formal request, but if you're saying this is unauthorized..." She trailed off, stood, and gestured for me to follow her. In the small back office, the hum of the monitor filled the silence. She tapped the keyboard, and a video window popped open. My heart thudded in my ears as the image sharpened. Lydia. Richard. Sitting in the banker's chairs like they belonged there, signing papers. Lydia's hand swept across the signature line, her eyes flicking down to her phone in between strokes. Richard was relaxed, almost smug, leaning back as if he were watching a show he'd seen 100 times. Susan paused the footage and zoomed in on the form. "There," she said quietly. "My name. My signature line." But it wasn't my handwriting. The loops were wrong. The slant was off. Too forced. Too careful. It looked like someone trying to sound out a language they didn't speak. "Do you want a copy?" she asked. "Yes." She printed it out, sliding it toward me along with the statement. I signed the security log to request the footage, my pen catching slightly near the bottom. That tiny pause left a faint ink stain on the page, a quirk I'd inherited from my grandfather, who always did the same thing when writing checks. I stared at it for a moment, the familiarity grounding me. The contrast between that authentic mark and the neat, lifeless forgery lit something in me. This wasn't just theft, it was impersonation. They'd tried to erase me, even from my own bank account. Susan lowered her voice. "If this becomes a legal matter, our compliance department will have to testify. Officially, I can't tell you what to do, but you might want to keep that in mind." That was the first time all day I felt like the ground was tilting back in my favor. The bank wasn't my enemy. Not yet. As I gathered the paperwork, Michael, the young teller who'd been at the counter earlier, walked past. He slipped a folded slip of paper into my hand without stopping. I didn't even look at it until I stepped outside into the afternoon sun. 4 words scrawled in rushed handwriting. "Check the safe deposit." I stood there for a moment, the city noise dull in my ears. The money was one thing, but if they'd moved it into something else, something harder to trace, this was about to get even uglier. I left the bank with the footage in my pocket and Michael's cryptic note burning in my mind. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to the main branch downtown, the one with the old stone columns and the basement vault. 2 hours later, I was standing in front of the thick steel door that led to the safe deposit room. My palms felt oddly damp. I'd been here dozens of times as a kid with my grandfather, holding his hand while he unlocked the heavy door. Back then, it felt like stepping into a treasure cave. Now it felt like walking into an interrogation. Evelyn, the vault attendant, looked up from her desk as I approached. Her glasses were perched at the tip of her nose, and she gave me a polite nod. "Afternoon? Name?" I gave it, sliding my ID across the counter. She typed something into her computer, then reached for a large, leather-bound logbook. Flipping through the pages, she stopped, ran a finger down a column, and frowned. "You were last here, nearly a year ago, but there was another visit just 3 days back." I didn't have to ask. "Lydia," I said, more to myself than to her. Her eyes flicked to mine for a beat before she handed me the clipboard to sign in. "That's what it says here." She led me through the chilled hallway, the scent of metal and old carpet lingering in the air. The vault door groaned open, and inside, rows of boxes lined the walls. Our family's box had been opened by my grandfather decades ago, his name embossed in neat letters on the original paperwork. The lock clicked as Evelyn inserted the master key, then stepped back so I could use mine. The metal drawer slid out with a dull scrape. I set it on the narrow table and opened the lid. The first thing I saw was an envelope, thick, cream-colored, sealed in wax. My grandfather's handwriting scrolled across the front. "For my grandson. Only when the time is right." My throat tightened. I ran a finger over the lettering, but I didn't open it. Not yet. Underneath were several folded receipts. I opened them one by one. They were for gold bullion purchases, dated the same day as the $990,000 withdrawal. My stomach sank. The gold wasn't here. I kept going, pulling out smaller boxes. One was a familiar black velvet case. I knew it instantly. Grandfather's gold cufflinks. He wore them at every important family gathering, from weddings to funerals. I opened the case and froze. Only one cufflink was inside. In the empty space lay a crumpled scrap of paper. I unfolded it carefully. A single name and an address were scrawled in uneven ink, an out-of-town storage facility I'd never heard of. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind already moving ahead. If Lydia had the gold moved there, it might still be recoverable, but the fact that she'd left a trail? That didn't feel like her style. Evelyn cleared her throat. Technically, without the joint key holder's consent, you shouldn't be removing documents that aren't yours. I slipped the scrap into my pocket anyway. Noted. She didn't stop me, but her eyes lingered, as if weighing whether to say more. I closed the box, slid it back into the wall, and followed her out. The cool air of the basement gave way to the warmer lobby, sunlight spilling across the marble floor. Outside, I took a breath, pulled my phone from my bag, and started toward my car. That's when it buzzed. The message was short. You're digging too deep. Stop now. Or he dies. I stopped cold on the sidewalk, the words swimming before my eyes. They didn't have to name him. I knew exactly who he was. Grandfather. Still lying in that ICU bed, the text froze me mid-step, the words blurring as my grip tightened on the phone. I ducked into the nearest bench under the hospital's awning, my thumb already hitting call on the ICU's main line. ICU, this is Marjorie speaking. It's about my grandfather. Room 412, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Is he okay? There was a pause. My heartbeat filled the silence. He's still with us, Marjorie finally said. Vitals are holding, though it's still critical. You can visit during the next window at 4. I exhaled slowly, my grip loosening on the phone. Thank you, I murmured. Hanging up, I sat there for a long moment, the threat replaying in my head. I should have called the police. Any sane person would have. But I knew in my gut this wasn't a stranger. This was closer to home. If I tipped my hand too early, whoever sent that text would just dig deeper into hiding. I needed proof, not just suspicion. By late morning, I was on the road, following the faded address from the crumpled scrap of paper. The city gave way to scrubland, then a sleepy town with more boarded-up storefronts than open ones. The storage facility sat at the far edge, an aging sprawl of corrugated metal units, half the doors dented and sun-faded. A bell above the office door jingled as I stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of motor oil and old paper. Behind the counter sat a man in his 60s, flannel shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, reading glasses dangling from a cord. His name tag read, Tom. Afternoon, he said, not looking up from the ledger. You here to pay or to empty? I'm here to access a unit, I said, sliding the address toward him. He glanced at it, then back at me, skeptical. Not without the renter on file or a court order? You got either? Not exactly. I reached into my bag and placed the lone gold cufflink on the counter. This belonged to the person who rented it. His gaze fixed on the cufflink for a long beat. He reached out, turned it in his palm. Haven't seen one of these in, well, a while. You're related to Walter? My grandfather, I said. Something in his shoulders eased. Without another word, he reached under the counter, pulled out a ring of keys, and motioned for me to follow. The unit was near the back, the metal door groaning as it rolled upward. A draft of stale air and dust hit me first. Inside, rows of wooden chests stood stacked like an odd treasure hoard, each with shipping labels from cities I recognized, and some I didn't. Against the far wall sat a rickety table piled with ledgers. I flipped one open, scanning pages of neat, slanted handwriting, transactions funneled through unfamiliar company names, amounts that made my stomach twist. Then my hand brushed the underside of the table and caught on something. I crouched, prying at a loose panel until it came free. Inside was a small black case. I unzipped it to find a video camera, its battery long dead, and a bundle of SD cards. Each was labeled with a date. One date made my breath hitch, the same day as the $990,000 withdrawal. I didn't even wait to leave the lot. Sitting in my truck with the laptop balanced on the console, I slid the card in. The footage was grainy, the angle slightly off, as if the camera had been hidden. Lydia sat at a table across from our father, her smile wide, a man in a dark suit beside them. They were exchanging papers, then the man pushed a heavy case across the table. Lydia's voice carried clear enough to sting. "He'll never know until it's too late." I replayed it, bile rising in my throat. On the second pass, something else caught my eye, a clipped badge on the suited man's pocket. I zoomed in, squinting. It wasn't a corporate ID. It was a nurse's badge, from the same hospital where my grandfather lay hooked up to machines. The nurse's badge burned in my mind like a warning flare I couldn't ignore. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, I was back at the hospital, moving through the hallways with that hyper-aware edge you get when you know danger is close, but can't yet prove it. The ICU was quieter at night, the low hum of machines mixing with muted footsteps on the polished floor. I took a chair just outside my grandfather's room, pretending to scroll my phone while my eyes tracked every person who stepped in or out. A tall man in scrubs glanced at me and quickly looked away. Two others rolled in equipment. Each time the door opened, my shoulders tightened. Marjorie came by during her rounds, pausing to check his chart before leaning toward me. "You look like you're counting cards," she said softly, keeping her voice light but her eyes curious. I hesitated. "I've got reason to think someone connected to the hospital has been in contact with my family in ways they shouldn't be." Her brows knit, but she didn't push. "That's a big claim," she murmured. "I'm not ready to go public with it yet," I said. "But if you notice anything, or anyone, out of place, I'd appreciate knowing." Marjorie nodded once. "I'll keep my eyes open." She gave my arm a quick squeeze before moving on. I'd barely settled back when the sound of heels clicked down the corridor. Lydia appeared, a bouquet of lilies cradled in her arms, and that polished smile she wore like armor. "Well, well," she said, stepping inside the doorway. "You didn't tell me you'd be here tonight." I stood, keeping my tone neutral. "Didn't think you needed to know." My gaze lingered on the flowers. "Those from the same place you've been storing other things?" Her lips parted, the smile faltering for a split second before she recovered. "I don't know what you're implying." "You do," I said quietly. "And you know I've seen it." She stepped closer until her perfume was cloying in the stale ICU air. "You can't protect him forever," she whispered, her voice just sharp enough to slice through the hum of machines. Then she turned and set the flowers by the bed, brushing past me without another glance. My jaw ached from holding back what I wanted to say. Instead, I crossed the hall to where Marjorie was updating a chart. "Do you know a nurse? Tall, maybe mid-40s, dark hair, works nights?" She looked up sharply. "Why?" "I think I saw him in a place he shouldn't have been." She hesitated, glancing around before leaning closer. "If it's who I'm thinking, he's on the night rotation. Quiet type. Keeps to himself. You might check the staff parking logs. Security keeps records of who comes and goes." It was just past 11 when I slipped out of the ICU and made my way to the far lot where hospital staff parked. I found a shadowed corner near the fence and waited, camera app ready on my phone. The minutes stretched. At 11:45, movement caught my eye. A man stepping out from the side entrance, the same profile from the video, carrying a medical cooler in one hand. He didn't look around, just walked straight to a plain white van with no markings. I snapped 3 quick photos, zooming in on his face, the cooler, the plates. He slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. I put my hand on my ignition, ready to follow, but before I could shift into gear, a shadow loomed in front of my hood. A broad man in a dark jacket stood there, badge on his belt catching the glow of the lot's single lamp. His name tag read, Reed. He didn't move, just rested one hand on his belt, his eyes locked on mine, cold and unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, voice low. Reed's hand stayed on his belt, the weight of his stare pressing harder than the words he'd just spoken. I didn't flinch. Instead, I curled my fingers tighter around my camera, the smooth edges warm from my palm. In that moment, it felt like the only thing standing between me and whatever game he was playing. "You're trespassing in a restricted zone," he said, his tone flat, like he was reciting a policy he'd used 100 times. I leaned back in my seat but didn't start the engine. Funny, I thought parking lots were public access after visiting hours. Unless you mean restricted as in, you don't want me seeing what just left here in that white van. Something flickered in his expression, quick as a blink. "Watch yourself," he said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. I let the corner of my mouth lift. "Sure. Just know my camera's got a clearer memory than I do, and it might remember a few things the police would find interesting." That was the first crack. He exhaled slowly, scanning the empty lot, then jerked his head toward the far side, away from the security cameras mounted on the hospital wall. "Get out of the car. Walk with me." I hesitated, weighing the risk, then stepped out, my sneakers crunching on the gravel. We moved toward the shadow of a service shed, the night air heavy with exhaust and damp asphalt. "I'm not your enemy," he said low, almost like he was convincing himself. "But there are things in the ICU you don't want to be anywhere near. I've seen enough to know it's bad. For everyone. You should walk away now." I crossed my arms. "You're telling me to back off while admitting you know something's wrong. That's not how you get someone to listen." He opened his mouth to answer, but the sweep of headlights across the lot made us both turn. An unmarked sedan rolled in slow, tires hissing on the wet pavement. The driver's door opened and a tall man stepped out, suit jacket open, badge clipped at his belt. "Reed," he called, his voice carrying just enough authority to make me straighten. "Harper," Reed muttered under his breath, as if the name explained everything. The detective's eyes landed on me. "You must be the one poking around." He didn't ask. It was a statement. "Depends who's asking," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'm the guy who's been chasing a trail of unexplained patient declines for the last 6 months, Harper said. "And I think your friend with the cooler in that van is tied to an organ trafficking ring." My chest tightened. "So it's not just me seeing ghosts in the ICU." "No," Harper said. "But I can't move without evidence. And from the way Reed's looking at you, I'm guessing you've got something that could help both of us." I pulled the camera from my bag and powered it on, the images from earlier vivid in my mind. "If I give you the photos, you tell me anything that could help keep my grandfather alive." He nodded once. "Deal." I handed it over. Harper scrolled, thumb steady on the button. Then he stopped, frowning. "Where are they?" "They're there," I said quickly. 3 shots, face, cooler, license plate. I took them not even 15 minutes ago. Harper turned the camera so I could see the empty gallery. No photos, not even the older ones. My stomach dropped. "I swear," I began, but stopped when I caught Reed watching me, his expression unreadable. "Guess we'll have to catch him again," Harper said calmly, slipping the camera back into my hand. "In the act." His tone wasn't impatient. It was measured, like he was already drawing up the next move in his head. A distant siren wailed through the city streets, fading as it moved away. Harper stepped closer, lowering his voice until only I could hear. "Tomorrow night, I'll need you in the ICU at exactly 2:17 a.m. I didn't ask Harper why that exact time. All I knew was I had 24 hours to get my head straight and be ready. The next night, the hospital was a different creature. Quiet, stripped of its daytime chaos, lit in that pale, unnatural glow that makes every shadow feel longer than it should. I came early, giving myself time to walk the corridors, learn which doors clicked shut on their own and which ones stayed ajar if you nudged them right. The ICU floor felt like the air had been held too long, still, stale, and listening. Harper was already in an unused observation room tucked behind a set of double doors. A single desk lamp lit the space, throwing his face half in shadow. "Close it," he murmured, nodding toward the door behind me. When it latched, he slid a pen across the table. "Looks ordinary," he said, "but it's recording, audio and video. Keep it clipped where it can see straight ahead. Don't play with it, don't tap it, just let it run." I clipped it to my jacket pocket, making sure the lens peeked out just enough. My heartbeat felt louder than the hum of the hospital lights. We sat in that room for 15 minutes, saying little. Every creak in the hallway made me think someone had found us already. Harper kept glancing at his watch, not impatient, just counting down. At 2:16, he gave a small nod toward the door. "Showtime." We slipped into the corridor just as a gurney came into view, its wheels whispering against the tile. Nurse Dana pushed it steadily, her face calm in a way that made my skin prickle. The patient on it wasn't my grandfather, too young, too still, but the IV bag swayed with each push, clear liquid glinting under the lights. Walking beside her was the man from the van, the same easy stride, the same too-casual grip on a cooler in his left hand. His scrubs looked fresh, but there was nothing clean about the way his eyes kept flicking toward every corner. I kept a safe distance, letting the pen camera drink in the scene. They reached a side door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The man swiped a keycard, and the lock gave a soft click. He pushed the cooler inside first, then guided the gurney after him. From my angle, I caught a glimpse: stainless steel counters, rows of labeled trays, and a refrigeration unit humming in the back. My stomach turned. Harper started forward, but a sharp electronic beep froze him. The overhead lights in the corridor dimmed, replaced by a slow, pulsing red glow. "Security override," he muttered, pulling his badge from his belt. "They just locked down this section." I edged closer to the doorway, camera still aimed. That's when Dana's head turned. Her eyes locked on mine, and for a second, there was no confusion. She knew exactly what I was doing. "Hey!" she shouted, her voice ricocheting down the corridor. The suspect's head snapped toward me, then toward Harper, and without hesitation, he abandoned the cooler. The alarms erupted, loud enough to rattle the glass in the door. But instead of heading for the nearest exit, he bolted in the opposite direction, straight toward the main ICU rooms. Toward my grandfather. It took me a beat to register the change in direction. Then I was moving, my shoes hammering the tile, the pen camera bouncing against my chest. Harper shouted something behind me, but all I could hear was the pounding in my ears. I rounded the corner just in time to see the man's shadow stretch across my grandfather's door. My chest burned, my breath tearing out in short bursts. If he reached him first, everything was over. I sprinted after him, my chest burning, because if he reached my grandfather first, everything was over. The ICU door swung wide, the hinges letting out a metallic groan that seemed far too loud in the silence. I shoved my way in, heart hammering, and there he was, leaning over my grandfather's bed, syringe in hand. His movements were quick, but his eyes were cold, fixed on the IV port like it was a target. Before I could shout, Harper was already on him. The sound of bodies hitting the tile was sharp, followed by the syringe clattering across the floor and spinning until it stopped near my shoes. Harper's weight pinned him down, his voice a controlled growl as he called for security. 2 guards rushed in, and in the same breath, another pair came through the opposite door with Nurse Donna in their grip. She didn't fight, didn't speak, just kept her eyes low, like she'd already decided there was no way out. I turned back to my grandfather. His eyelids fluttered, and for a fleeting moment, his hand found mine. It was weak, barely a squeeze, but it was enough to make my throat tighten. "You're safe," I whispered, not sure if he could hear me. The rest of the night blurred into flashing badges, muted radios, and the shuffle of shoes on sterile floors. By dawn, I found myself in the hospital's conference room, seated at a long table with Harper at my side. Across from us sat the hospital administrator, a couple of detectives, my parents, and my sister. Dana and the man were somewhere down the hall, in custody. Harper set my pen on the table, pressed a button, and let the footage play. The video showed everything: Dana's steady hands pushing the gurney, the man with the cooler, the swipe of the keycard, and the glimpse inside that cold stainless steel room. Every sound, every glance was there. No one spoke. My parents' faces were unreadable at first, but when Harper shifted to the second clip, the one tying their financial withdrawals to the man's offshore accounts, my mother's eyes darted to my father and my sister's jaw clenched. The administrator cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "There's something you should know," he said, looking at me. "Before he fell ill, your grandfather moved $990,000 into a secure trust under your name. His instructions were explicit. Use it for his care, and no one else is to have access." It was almost comical, the way my sister's head snapped toward me, her mouth opening but no words coming out. My father's hands flexed on the table, and my mother stared straight ahead like maybe if she didn't blink, this wouldn't be real. The administrator slid a set of documents across to me. "Their access to all family assets has been revoked, effective immediately." I signed the treatment authorizations with a steady hand, making sure my grandfather would get the care he needed without delay. When I slid the papers back, I didn't bother looking at my parents. They were already on their feet, leaving without a word. My sister trailed after them, her face pale and tight. Harper stayed behind. "You did more than save him," he said quietly. "This is going to bring down more people than you realize." The room emptied slowly, the chaos of the night settling into a kind of quiet that felt strange after so much noise. I gathered my things, the weight of the pen lighter now that its job was done. Walking back to my grandfather's room, I felt the first real breath I'd taken in days. The early sunlight cut through the blinds, painting soft lines across his blanket. I pulled up a chair, sat beside him, and let my shoulders finally relax. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about what they'd taken from me, only what I'd fought to save.